the ad tech ecosystem has been designed and has sort of turned into this big machine to churn out volume and maximize reach and minimize cost. And that has come at a cost, because when the primary KPI has been minimize cost when it comes to monetary, it is maximizing cost when it comes to the environment. And ironically, it's actually costing you monetarily, because a lot of that inventory that's very, very cheap is not very good. So you're not reaching your right audience to begin with. So we really want to look at that first.
Welcome to Brands for a Better World, the podcast that brings you the stories behind the people and products building a more just, healthy, and regenerative future for us all. Tune in weekly, and together, we'll learn about why these better products and brands were created, how they're helping fix broken systems, and what you can do to support them. My hope is that you'll discover some new brands to love and get some sparks of inspiration that will help you live your best life. Hi, I'm your host, Gage Mitchell, founder of Modern Species, a sustainable brand design agency helping better brands grow to scale their impact. If you like this show, please help it grow by leaving ratings and reviews on your podcast app and by sharing your favorite episodes with your friends. Maybe this will be one of them. On this episode, I'm speaking with Avril Tomlin-Hood, founder and CEO of BOA, about the carbon footprint of digital advertising, how her agency helps clients decarbonize their media, where her passion for sustainability came from, and what kind of messaging and platforms are working best for brands right now. Then we wrap up with a fun, rapid round question segment. Enjoy. Hello, my name is Gage Mitchell. I'm the founder and creative director of Modern Species, where we're helping impact-driven CPG brands so we can scale their positive impact in the world. And then also the host of the podcast, Brands for a Better World, where we're just sharing stories of impact-driven leaders, products, and brands so we can all move the world forward together.
Great. Hey, Gage. Hey, everybody. I'm Avril Tomlin-Hood. I'm the founder and CEO of BOA. BOA is a sustainable digital media buying agency headquartered in Vancouver, Canada. And we work with purpose-driven, sustainable brands to further their missions through decarbonized advertising. I'm really excited to chat with you today about all that we've both got going on in this exciting space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm specifically excited to talk about the decarbonizing campaigns, because I think that's something most people probably aren't thinking about, right? And I've noticed this through the web design work that we do, that it's now starting to become more common discussion point of what is the footprint of my website. And I think people are starting to understand that their phones and computers at home and all their digital footprint consumes electricity to run those things. But beyond that, everything on the internet, all your apps, et cetera, also consume electricity, and where those server farms are consume resources like water, electricity, et cetera. So, and then, there's all the parts within your device. So I think it's starting to become more of a conversation, but what I haven't heard anyone talk about, except for you, is digital campaigns. Like, of course those have a footprint, right? But for those who haven't thought that far into their footprint yet, why don't you start by just explaining where that footprint is coming about within a campaign?
Yeah, great question. And one that we, of course, as sustainable media buyers are talking about a lot these days. And even just like you mentioned, the idea that everything we do online has a real world impact. I think that's something that is still more or less in its infancy as a general discussion amongst consumers, individuals, companies, everybody, really. I think there was this great move to push everything online and go paperless, and without really thinking about the implications of that, the negative externalities, as scientists would call them, in terms of what's going to result what's going to happen as a result of that way down the line. And what has happened as a result of that is this mass digitization, as you said, created the need for enormous amounts of energy to be used. So server farms are the main culprit here. And the internet runs on advertising. And we're in the business of advertising. So I started really thinking about this a couple of years ago, and there are some amazing leaders in the space, industry leaders, tech leaders that are starting to develop some interesting technologies and some methodologies and some initiatives to try to measure out of that internet emissions that we see, so the number that we quote often is it's 3.7% of global greenhouse gas emissions comes from the internet. That's comparable to the airline industry. So out of that, what's coming from the ad ecosystem. And as I said, the internet runs on advertising. You can, be sure it's a significant chunk. And so the actual nuts and bolts of it are servers, the ad ecosystem, programmatic ad ecosystem is very complex. It's multi-layered. There are a multitude of players, intermediaries from the time an agency comes up, like an agency like your agency, Gage, would come up with a creative concept for a campaign. And between then and when the end consumer, potential consumer, is served an ad on their phone or their desktop, there are a whole bunch of things that need to happen in the supply chain on the back end for that ad to get to that set of eyeballs. And each one of those points in the journey involves a call to a server. And each call to the server is, we like to think of it like a little poof of energy. It's visually, sometimes.
I like the poof.
Yeah, I like the poof too. That was our great writer who came up with that one. So if you think about that and you multiply, however many advertisers by however many ad campaigns, by however many impressions, by however many, people that are being served these ads, this is an enormous impact. So hopefully that kind of gives an overall, I could get way into the weeds, but I think I'm going to stop it there.
Basically, every time anyone sees an ad, pushes a button, anything like that, there's obviously an interaction between their device, which is consuming energy, of course, and all the devices that need to get pinged in order to deliver that content to them. So if you click a button to read more about an ad, well, now that's your phone or your computer talking to some servers somewhere that are delivering back the next page that you need to load, right? So everything that needs to get loaded or every interaction that happens is causing that poof of energy, as you say, is, the bulk of it. One thing that I'm curious to understand from your standpoint too is, I know with sustainable web design, things like the colors you're using for the website matter, right? For example, Modern Species website for a very long time has just been a dark website, which is not what most of the internet is used to, but that's because the dark pages require less energy to project in your screen, right? So you're consuming less energy on the local device. Another thing is when you're uploading images to your website, you want to optimize those images. So you're not uploading like a 10 megabyte file that then a user's mobile device or desktop device will have to download that large file. You kind of optimize it for the use case. So there's lots of little things like that you can do, not only to your point with every interaction or every poof of energy when calling up servers, but then things within let's say the campaign itself, like the design of the campaign, whether it's file size or color usage or amount of visual graphics versus clean graphics or different things like that, probably also has an impact, I would guess, but let me know if I'm not correct there.
No, you are correct. So that's actually a major consideration that we make when we go into audit previous campaigns or we're planning a new campaign is file size. So that's a big one. So if the image that you have is heavier, it's going to require more energy to serve, right? So we've run some great A/B tests where we have essentially proven that, the Meta and Google, their default recommended file size is bigger than it needs to be. So you're not going to, quality of your image is not going to suffer in any way if we knock it down some pixels or some, knock the weight of it down. So that's definitely one. It's the size of the file. It's where the ad is being served in a lot of cases. So there are more energy intensive websites out there than others. And so when you're buying programmatically, we have, access to some technologies that allow us to see which websites are, climate risk, as we call it in the industry. Yeah. So some websites, we call it MFAs, made for advertising, rely heavily on a lot of advertising, and they're auto refreshing. So say you're looking at a website and you're reading an article, and the ad unit to the right hand side of what you're looking at keeps auto refreshing with a new banner. That's carbon intensive because they're serving more ads in a less period of time. So more of those poofs of energy into the, into the supply chain. Just a couple other examples of where that energy is coming from.
Yeah. So there's lots of, I always talk about this from a sustainability standpoint, that I feel like for sustainability, it's, if you want to start thinking about it, it's just about making the invisible systems visible so that you can understand what's going on and then make interventions to reduce your impact, or maybe make a positive impact somewhere in that system, right? So I think kind of what you're painting the picture of right now is making all this stuff that happens when we're clicking a button. We don't see what happens, but there's all sorts of stuff happening in the background with pinging lots of different servers and websites to deliver you whatever content you have. And all of that is part of the system. So considering that system more intentionally, you can make better decisions along the way. Yeah,
absolutely. And just, I think the first step we take as strategic buyers and planners is assessment and audit and lay of the land, and sort of peeking behind or under the hood of what marketing activities a brand or client is doing. And with the knowledge of the fact that every intermediary, be it a DSP, that's demand side platform, or an SSP, a supply side platform, are all, wheeling and dealing in data, right? And every wheel and deal in data is energy intensive. And we can kind of immediately see sometimes that a lot of that is superfluous. So it's like, we don't even need to be considering advertising on those types of sites. Cut them out. Immediate, impact made there.
Right.
And sometimes it's a bit more complex, but it's just the first step in starting to think about all the things that make up this supply chain and what areas we could have impact in.
So with that said, we're kind of painting a picture of all the problem areas, but I know you have kind of a specific offering around decarbonizing campaign solutions. So can you talk about then, if those are all the issues and the things to be looking out for, how do you go about making it better?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that kind of ties into the idea of really needing to see what's going on a bit under the hood first, and the solution oriented approach that we take is one of first, assessing what is going on, and that includes looking at things like, how are you buying your media? So is it through open web, programmatic, trade desks, and beyond that, how much visibility and hands-on keyboards do you actually have into how you're buying your programmatic inventory? Because that's where, a lot of this stuff, like the ad tech ecosystem has been designed and has sort of turned into this big machine to churn out volume and maximize reach and minimize cost. And that has come at a cost, because when the primary KPI has been minimize cost when it comes to monetary, it is maximizing cost when it comes to the environment. And ironically, it's actually costing you monetarily, because a lot of that inventory that's very, very cheap is not very good. So you're not reaching your right audience to begin with. So we really want to look at that first. We want to look at things like you mentioned. So file size. So how many videos are you running? Do you need to be running all these videos? Are they even performing? Are you just running videos because someone said once videos are going to perform better, but they're not driving the results that they should be driving? And so taking a really, adding that KPI of carbon to all the other KPIs that we're always taking into account, like our ROAS and our CTR and our, impression level when it comes to reach, and tacking that on, taking it just as seriously. The weight of things, the file format of things, other things that we look at, and we're able to see due to emerging technology partners, such as, they're called Scope 3, and others are doing this, but they're our preferred partner. We do testing with them and run campaigns through them. Is they're developing and have developed some technology that allows us to see energy intensity based on things like energy grid mapping. So if you're serving a campaign in let's say in the California, but one area of California, Los Angeles versus another, let's say somewhere, Anaheim, or wait, is Anaheim part of Los Angeles? You know what I mean? Just like different areas specifically. Nearby. Your performance is not as strong, but the energy grid is more reliable on non-renewable sources. We can make calculated decisions to optimize the campaign delivery based on that. So we could say, you know what, we're not going to serve in Anaheim, or we're not going to serve in whatever, Northern California, because we're not seeing the click-through rates. We're not seeing the ROI. We're not seeing the add to carts that we want to see. And the energy is more intensive. But what we are seeing in, Santa Monica is the KPIs associated with our performance metrics and our monetary related performance metrics, I should say, are strong, and the energy grid is more efficient. So we can make decisions based on this whole big picture. So we're taking our heads out of the sand a little bit, instead of just looking at those like primary e-com driven metrics that we're used to seeing and talking about, and looking at it a bit more holistically.
That's really cool. I didn't know you were going to like that depth of kind of geolocation intensity of energy. But in my mind, I don't do the work that you do in terms of managing these digital campaigns. So in my more naive or surface level mind, I know that people optimize campaigns based on which version of an ad is working, right? That makes sense. They'll optimize based on audience metrics of, hey, we're trying a few different audience pools, and we'll find the one that's clicking more or buying more or whatever, and then we'll serve that group more of the ads, like various things like that. And I guess I knew that people were optimizing obviously based on region, like we're selling mostly in California, so let's target there. But I wasn't aware that you were able to get so granular as to say Anaheim versus LA, like, LA is performing better and has a lower footprint or something like that. That's kind of a level of detail in both the impact and the efficacy, I guess, of the campaign that I wasn't aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I should say we can't take credit for the methodology behind that. That's all Scope 3 and some other, pioneers in the ad tech space. We're not ad tech producers, but we partner with them to use those solutions and apply them. And it is fantastic. I mean, it's still, I should say, in its infancy. We're building the plane in the air as it's being, driven, so to speak. Yeah. But those are the types of things that we can take into consideration. And I just wanted, while it's in my mind, to stick on targeting for a minute and expand on that, because that's sort of another one of those, under the umbrella of the first things that we do when we're helping a client to decarbonize an existing campaign or create a new campaign with a less of a footprint, is we really look at the targeting and we dig in there, because again, the default for a lot of these larger ad platforms, we're talking, programmatic walled gardens such as Meta and Google, is always more, right? The default is more. The default is wider net. The default is deliver more impressions. And that's not necessarily the best type of advertising to execute. Sometimes it is, right? Depending on your goals, depending on the quality of the impressions and the structure of your campaigns. But generally speaking, the approach that we like to take is one that's a lot more strategically finite with the targeting, because we want to try to get to those highly, highly qualified people sooner, right? So the less time we are casting the wider net and delivering superfluous impressions, the less energy that the campaign is consuming. And so we really rely on some, internal tools and processes that see us tighten that targeting up kind of right out of the gate and show results on both sides. So it's results from carbon perspective and results obviously from a KPI perspective, which is, primary goal. Most of our clients, like the carbon is often like a nice to have, right? Carbon, but we wouldn't be in business if we weren't able to, hit those targets for CPG brands in particular, because that's what keeps the lights on for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because if you think about it from a more analog example, if I'm doing a direct mail campaign, it's going to take a lot more financial resources and a lot more footprint for me to print 30 million of these that I'm sending all across the country versus 300 that I'm sending to one specific city or one specific smaller list that is my specific audience. So
yeah, that's a great makes example. A lot of sense. Yeah.
As part of that kind of auditing process, do you provide these brands with a report that's like a baseline of like, here's how your campaign platform or whatever is currently performing from KPIs, with one of those KPIs being carbon, like here's where you're at now, and they get some sort of report that they can, file away or whatever, so that when you finish your work, they get another report of like, hey, look how much we optimized it. You reduced your campaign impact by 50% or something, like, or footprint by 50%. That way they can actually take those numbers and put them into whatever other impact reporting they do. Is that correct assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really important for a lot of brands right now in this evolving ecosystem of regulatory changes and, carbon impact reporting and ESG reporting and a lot of B Corps, right? We've worked with B Corps and the numbers are really important to have to prove, hey, we're doing something and it's quantifiable. It's not just some, PR case study, right? So yeah, right. We're really excited. So a lot of this has sort of been a bit more manual and a bit more, the solutions are there, the methodology is there, and it's kind of scattershot. You can access stuff through DV360. So that's Google's third-party ad serving solution. You can access through ShareThrough, which is one of the huge programmatic supplier in Exchange. But we're part of a beta cohort at the moment, as of today and midsummer, late summer. Oh gosh, already to test a new reporting dashboard. So this will, with Scope 3, our partner. So this will actually enable us we're feeding in our campaign applications. So the API is connecting. So we're connecting our clients' campaign feeds to the Scope 3 media reporting dashboard. And then in real time, ideally a little bit down the road, right now it's a bit of a manual upload, but down the road, we will be able to have that as part of our suite of reporting. Nice. Like Looker Studio, so a real-time dashboard where you can log in and the client can see, oh, today this many impressions and clicks were delivered and this many add to carts and this much ROAS. Like we want to have that integrated eventually so you can see, oh, like this was the carbon spend today, right? And these are some optimizations that BOA made to, make a dent in that. And at the end, come up with that decarbonization percentage number that you mentioned. So right now, how we're doing that is we're kind of taking a campaign previously ran for clients and we're saying, let us, do the math here and estimate the carbon impact based on these, CO2 numbers that we get from these technology partners that are, have methodologies, open source methodologies to get to that number. And then run a new campaign using our proprietary internal tools that are just more like good advertising. Like we do what we do really well. So we're going to, by default, like decrease your carbon, but then also some of these cool things we get access to. Nice. And then come up with a differential. So we, decarbonized your ad by between this and this campaign by this much percentage. So that's the goal. That's the vision. That's what we're working towards.
I know it's probably hard to say because everyone's starting from a different point, but do you have like a average percentage of decrease that you're typically able to hit for most brands that you start working with?
Oh yeah, that's hard to say. It's going to depend on the platform. So Meta is still very much in beta. So that's what we're engaged in some early stage meta tests. So that is really hard to answer when it comes to paid social, paid search. Programmatic, there are a lot of case studies we can point to that, on average, we can see as much as a 30 to 40% decrease in emissions just by making some really simple adjustments, like flicking off those MFA sites that hyperload and overload with advertisements. So that would be cool. the one number I could point to confidently.
That's great. Yeah. And like you said, it's early and everyone's starting at a different place. So it's hard to say. With that said, I know with all, carbon footprint kind of measuring or assessments or improvements, the first goal is to eliminate whatever you can / reduce whatever you can in terms of your footprint. Much of what you're talking about kind of fits into that. And then what some companies will do above and beyond that is say, okay, well, with whatever's left right now that we can't get rid of, what do we do about that? and offsets or something like that is kind of usually the default to get your carbon neutral certification or something like that. So I'm curious, do you also have that as part of the program where you say, hey, look, we reduced it 30%. Do you want to also offset the remaining, 70% or something like that to be totally carbon neutral with this campaign?
Yeah, we've actually, we don't offer that. We've talked about offering that. We've toyed with it. I think we have sort of arrived at the conclusion that we don't want to add carbon offsetting to our roster of things that we do, just because I don't feel like I have any business getting into that niche. Yeah. I think that being able to give a client the number, right? The absolutely unavoidable cost of doing business. If you're going to run an advertising campaign to sell your wares, this is how much energy it's going to cost you. Giving them that number, they can then go and do what they will with that in terms of offsetting. And a lot of companies in the space that you and I work with, they have programs already that take that into account. But we really did think about it as part of the sort of overall package, the decarbonized package. But who knows, maybe that'll be an evolution. But right now, I wouldn't know enough about that world myself.
Yeah, fair enough. And like you said, if there are companies who are trying to become carbon neutral or net zero or something, they probably are already working with some partners to offset things. So may as well just add that number to it. I love connecting people and sharing resources. So let's take a pause from this conversation for a brief intro to a podcast you might be interested in.
Are you fascinated by the world of consumer startups? Are you interested in learning more about what it takes to get a company off the ground? If so, then Worldly Unboxed is the podcast for you. Join us, Aaron and Brandon, as we sit down with founders to discuss their entrepreneurial journeys and the lessons they've learned along the way. Stick around to hear Brandon and I talk about how these conversations are changing the way we are approaching our own venture, the kids' athletic shoe company. Whether you're an entrepreneur, an aspiring entrepreneur, or someone simply interested in the startup world, this podcast is for you. Listen to Worldly Unboxed on your favorite platform now. That's WORLDIE Unboxed.
And now, back to the conversation. Well, that's a great background, I think, on the kind of decarbonizing media solutions. But while we're on the topic of just more sustainable or impact-driven marketing, I figured I'd pick your brain a little bit more on what you're seeing out working in the world right now. So first off, like, what kind of messages are you seeing working best to convert conscious consumers?
I like this question because it doesn't really have, well, I like it because it doesn't have an answer. It's got it depends which consumer. It depends what they care about and what they're really, area of consciousness they're categorized as, if that makes any sense. If we say we run a campaign in Alberta in Canada, I'll use a Canadian example where we've run some campaigns for an energy efficiency related solution. And we see some really interesting stuff here about messaging because it varies so greatly based on what people care about. And I think conscious consumers, like, are you conscious of clean air for your family in the home, right? That's a different type of messaging. Are you conscious about the broader environmental impacts of the energy consumption on climate change? Like, that's a different type of messaging. Are you conscious of, spending the least money while having the least impact? It's a different kind of messaging. So we really find that test and learn is the best strategy there, and really digging deep into the personas that we're talking to. So that's not a direct answer. I know I can't tell you what kind of messaging because it's different. Sometimes it's more about your family, and sometimes it's more about health, and sometimes it's more about those things like clean air, and then sometimes it's more about the broader impact of sustainability. So it's really across the board. But I find that one of the most interesting parts of what we do in terms of communication optics and what people respond to, the psychology of that. Do you see anything would you say from the design side? I'm curious to get your thoughts too these days, and what is resonating and what is landing.
Right. And that was, part of the reason I asked too, is I think impact-driven businesses are trying to figure out, of all the things that they can talk about, like how good they are as a company or how much better for the planet their products are, or where they've cut plastic out of their supply chain, or what they've how they've redesigned their product formulations or whatever to be less toxic. Like there's lots of different things these companies are doing, like almost too many things, or definitely too many things to talk about all at once, and maybe even over time. So figuring out which messages to elevate up to the top as maybe the primary touch point messages is a big challenge, or has been a big challenge for a lot of these impact-driven brands. But what I'm starting to see in more of the data, and I guess this kind of fits past data too, of like, let's say you're a food product, whenever they survey consumers on the most important things, something like taste and, price or whatever, quality, always bubble up to the top.
Yeah. Typically
above things like, fair trade or giving back to the planet or things like that, right? Those show up as priorities, but it's not as important as, is this product any good? Because most people don't want to buy a product just because it's more sustainable, but it's a crappy product, right? They want to buy a good product that's also sustainable. So let's just assume baseline, your product's good. Then what do they care about after that? And what I've been reading recently is that it's kind of a what's in it for me type of culture that we're working with in the US, at least, which means the closer that benefit ties to them and or their immediate family, and then maybe their community after that, the better or the more effective that message is. So for example, again, back to the food thing, if your food product is healthier, then that means that's going to be an effective claim. Like if consumers are like, hey, this is a tasty product, check. Well, is it good for me? Is it going to, does it have allergens? Does it have toxic chemicals or whatever that I want to avoid? Is it gluten-free? Is it like whatever good for them happens to be based on the product? Like that's going to be one top priority. Is it safe for my family? A top priority. Does it support my local community? Is that that might be a priority. So if we're thinking of like how much to talk about fair trade, for example, a message about, hey, this supports farmers in your area, Anaheim, and you're selling to people in Anaheim, that's going to be more powerful than, hey, this pays people a fair wage in India or something like that. So it's very much a immediate circle outwards. So not to say that you can't tell those messages of, hey, this product is carbon neutral, or hey, this our ingredients are all fair trade. Those can be there, but they're, from a food sense, maybe more back panel, or from a digital sense, maybe it's after they click through the ad and go to the website or something like that. But the ad or the front panel of packaging, probably more important to focus on what's in it for me is the main thing, probably across a lot of categories.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with CPG in particular, you're right. We see this all over the place. It's taste and nutrition, taste and nutrition, taste and nutrition. Right. Like that's what you got to lead with. Because if you don't taste good, you're off like people don't want to eat you, no matter how good you are, like whatever your, corporate mission and whatever actions back that up, it doesn't matter. So taste and nutrition. Right. And then those are sort of, secondary, tertiary. And so I think it's interesting to think about it in terms of when, as well as who. So what the primary motivators. So are these people intrinsically motivated? Are they like, I want to buy products that are fair trade and non-GMO because I really believe in that, and you and I would probably fall into that category as individuals. Like right. I think it's really important to support those food systems for a better world. We're not the majority by any means. And then there are extrinsically motivated people who are like, I want to buy this because, it's a external trend, or it's something that I'm seeing. Because it'll make me look cool,
or my friend said it, or the celebrity used it, or, there's totally. All those psychology of persuasion kind of tactics of authority or social proof, et cetera, that you can lean on for sure. I think those are probably especially powerful in digital marketing, because you see influencers, popping up doing product shout outs or a bunch of other things like that. There's question marks with at least the clients I've talked to about whether or not those actually perform. Like, sure, it'll get you a bunch of eyeballs, but do those people then go and buy your products? Maybe, maybe not. I think it very depends on the influencer and their audience. But those kind of things obviously do help. But from an impact standpoint. I think if you can talk about the health or, basically like health or nutrition kind of stuff with food, obviously that matters. And I'm just picturing like clothing or something like that, right? Is this jacket gonna, keep me warmer, and or is it going to leach fewer chemicals into my skin? Like that kind of thing. That might make the most sense. Yeah, it's a tough one though, because like you said, then it's all down to like what is the brand and what is their differentiator. Like if their differentiator is like, hey, we just have more protein, then that's probably the message to lean in on. But if their differentiator is, hey, everyone else on the market is conventional, like chemical agriculture, and we're organic, well, the organic message is a good play to push because that means it's healthier or whatever, right? So.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. It's a bit of a ball of yarn, right? Because it's like you start to tug at it and you're like, oh, well, then this, and then this, and then this. And really it is, you got to chart out all this stuff. Like, especially when you get to our area of expertise, which I would say we're the end of the tail. Like often we don't get called upon until the campaign has been created and the, fun creative work has all been executed by you and your team and your clients. And then it's like, who do we reach with that message and how do we fine tune that message? And that's where you have to take all these things into account, the primary motivator, secondary motivator, all those things. So it's it's a fun puzzle that we get, and then we get to test it, right?
Well, that's the beauty of digital is you get to test it, right? A/B test it. Whereas if you're doing like a print campaign, you're probably just going to print one version, see how it runs for 6 months and then wait. And maybe change it up after that. But with digital, it's so much easier to just run multiple versions at once and see which one wins out. So it's a little bit more flexible. You can try 3 different messages and see which one's clicking. With that said, maybe something that's a little bit more easy to dial down and suggest like what's working right now is which kind of funnel types or platforms or campaign styles might be most effective right now. Like, is there anything that you're seeing in the marketplace right now that's like, because I know things like Meta, for example, go up and down because Meta was where you had to be for a long time. And now I've been hearing people say, well, Meta is really expensive and it's not converting as much anymore or something, So what's like a good mix that people should be considering for their campaign as maybe a default?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. Another answer that I don't have a string one too. No, but yes, on the nose about Meta. It's become very expensive. It still has some of the best targeting out there because they were just Wild Westing it for so many years, gobbling data. So they still maintain dominance and in being able to reach the breadth of consumers that we want as advertisers and our clients want. So Meta, paid social, paid search, and maybe I'll just speak. So I can't give a clearer answer about a trend is retail media. So retail media platforms in the CPG space in particular are kind of blowing up, and this is happening because of a few things, and the foremost being Google's announcement, which has been dragged and changed. And most recently they said, oh, wait, we're not going to do it, is the depreciation of the third-party cookie. And anyone who follows digital and has been on this journey with me has probably been banging their head against the wall too, because it's sort of like Google came up and they said, we're going to fundamentally change how the advertising ecosystem works. We're going to remove this piece of technology that allows advertisers to target users in the way that they've been, targeting them for years and years and years. And so with that announcement, a lot of changes happened. I think a lot of innovation, I think a lot of great things, privacy being a major concern, but also I won't get into my opinion about Google's motivations being Google's motivations. But basically from this, a lot of what has happened is retailers. So Walmart's been on this train for a while. Kroger, Sam's Club, some of the bigger ones have realized that they're sitting on these troves of first-party data. So valuable first-party data about their consumer. And what can you do with that data if you're, thinking about it in terms of marketing is you can package it and you can sell it to advertisers. So brands can reach highly qualified consumers based on this information that, say, Kroger or Walmart has about their shopper audience. So we know that this person or someone who looks like this person, based on the modeling that we can engage with, is an organic, natural shopper, or, they are really heavy in dairy products and organic dairy or non-organic dairy, whatever it may be. We're seeing retail media networks, we call them walled gardens because it's different from the open web. You can't kind of get in or out. You buy on there, you measure on there. What you can see is exclusive to activity that happens in terms of conversion and attribution on those walled garden platforms. Costco has just announced that they're building one, the biggest one to throw their hat in the ring. So that'll be huge actually in our sector. I'm quite excited about that because Costco knows you, right? Costco knows us. They know me and my husband and, what our purchasing behaviors are back however many years we've been members. And that's super valuable. So I'm also seeing some, it's a bad time to forget the name of this, but it's like a organic, natural sort of food supplier. They're an intermediary of some kind. They're coming to the table and saying, they're building a retail media network. I mean, small, big, you got it. Like everyone is jumping on this bandwagon. Who will survive? I don't know. But it's a trend that CPG brands must consider. How much of their spend do they want on Instacart, for instance, a great example of, more targeted way to reach consumers at point of sale, or on Kroger or on Walmart, and where's your customer? And budgets are being divvied up way differently now than they were, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago.
Wow,
but that's the story of my life working in digital media. Every time you talk to me, I'd say that. So, hey.
Yeah. That's part of why I've never personally got into like web development or things like this. Digital media or even like social media management these are the kind of things that to do it right, you have to live it. Like eat, breathe, and sleep, and like stay up to date on every little thing that's going on and what's working, what's not working, what is this platform doing, what's that platform doing, in order to really optimize it. But for me, I'm always like, I can't geek out on that. I'd rather just geek out on the brand side. So I stay focused there and then let the technical experts do their thing.
It's all important. It's all important part of the chain. And I don't know, sometimes I wonder too, it's like I have whiplash. It's constantly like, this has changed and that's changed. But I'm probably addicted to it in a way that is, let's say, healthy, because, we're doing good over here. We're doing good work, but it's definitely like never still. So,
right. I mean, it kind of reminds me of like nutrition advice in this country, right? It's like, what? Carbs are good for you. Carbs are bad for you. Protein's good for you. Protein's bad for you. Animals this, plants that. Yeah. And it's just like, you can't keep track of anything. It's difficult.
It is a roller coaster. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of data, a past guest, Karen with Makina, is also a great source of data because they have an app that allows consumers to get rewards for choosing, better for you options. And so they get to track all the consumers on their platform and what their buying habits are over time and which stores they're going into and what they're buying at different stores. So like if a shopper visits 3 different stores, they know why they're going to stores for different things. So there's some good data that they can provide as well. So shout out to Makina. With that said, obviously we've been geeking out for a little while on digital marketing type things and then carbon, but I'm curious, where did your passion for sustainability originally come from?
I suppose I was born into it in a way. I grew up in a very environmentally...
legacy.
Yeah, like legacy. My parents would be proud. Yeah. I grew up in a very environmentally conscious household. Like I've said, that my parents were doing things like, reusing saran wrap before that was cool. Like it was definitely instrumental teaching in my home about environment and consciousness around that, like one car and in a neighborhood where everybody had 2+ cars and recycling before it was recycling and vegetarianism for health and environmental reasons. So yeah, I came by it honestly, really. And it was sort of just always there. And it wasn't until, all that recently that I was able to figure out a way to incorporate it into my career. So for that, I'm very grateful.
Okay. So maybe that's a good follow-up question then, is like, how and when did you realize you could connect the dots between your personal commitments or beliefs around sustainability to your career?
Yeah, I guess a few years ago. So I've been in the agency game for a long time. I've run my agency for, I guess, I don't know, 8 years, something like that. Maybe more. I always get lost in time and space.
It's a little fuzzy.
It's a little fuzzy. I had a kid in there somewhere. Too focused on all the changes to Google and Meta. Exactly. I've been busy. And I think I did have a kid in there, and I do sort of look to that experience as shifting something within me, where I kind of had those moments. It wasn't like one big lightning bolt, but it was sort of just growing, where I was like, what am I doing? Like, am I using my superpower, so to speak, which was running an agency team of people who know this stuff inside and out, and to deliver results for clients? Am I using this to sell more people more stuff? Like, what's that about? As an environmentalist at heart, it started to just not feel quite right. I think the climate anxiety stuff was catching up with me. I started to question where my action was and where I could have impact. And it just sort of coincided with some of these developments in the industry around questioning energy use online and energy use in advertising. And I just kind of went down the rabbit hole a few years ago and started firstly, I actually dedicated the agency's mission to working with brands that I felt aligned with that purpose. So it was more just our client roster. It was deciding to start saying no to companies, and I've worked for lots of them over the years. Like, I've worked for some car companies, and I've worked for some, we'll leave it at that. Right. But, that never felt great. And so just saying, we're going to say, no, we're going to dig into this messaging and this commitment to partnership with companies whose values align with ours, sustainability, purpose-driven, all that. And then the rabbit hole of the tech impact and all that just sort of unraveled from there.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned multiple things there, because I think there are some, let's just say agencies, but it could be any company, agencies out there who will pick one kind of pillar of impact. I'll describe it as that, like, which could be, okay, we're only going to work with companies that match our values, right? That's one pillar. Another pillar would be, hey, we're going to work with anybody potentially, but we're going to do our work in a way that helps them make reduces their footprint or make a bigger impact. Another pillar is, hey, we're going to actually run our company the way we think companies should be run, whether that's B Corp 1% or, financial transparency, or, just be a great place to work, all those kind of things. So like at Modern Species, for example, like we set out to tackle all three pillars, like making sure we're working with people who give a shit and are doing things better, finding ways to help them do more good, and running our company the same way we expect them to run theirs, right? So I like that you mentioned the multi-tier angle to like weaving impact into your business, because I don't think everyone always thinks of it holistically. Maybe they just say, we're going to keep doing business as usual, but then give 10% of our money or budget or, whatever, time to a good cause. But at the same time, we're also destroying the world by working with these terrible clients. It's like, really?
Yeah. Well,
where's that logic come from?
Exactly. It's talking out of one side of your mouth, right? And I think it strikes me you're speaking of systems change versus, like more superficial areas for Band-Aid change or greenwashing and all these things that we come up against and we mull over and we talk about over here. But it is like your systems have to change. The way that we look at doing business has to change. It's just fundamentally, right? Like that's kind of the core of the problem. I'm sure we're going to solve that in this conversation, but if we're lucky enough, I can include you in this category of individuals who are in leadership positions who can make those decisions, right? So
Right.
I feel really privileged to get to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, systems change is, I think, a good way to look at it. Is one thing that like there's I forget the name of the agency, but they just B Corp just revoked their B Corp status because because they're working with oil companies or whatever was on the list of clean agencies that they're fighting against. But I think it's that kind of thing where it's you claim to be a good company, but then your actions don't follow through, right? So that's what I appreciate about like what you're doing and what some other kind of more purpose-driven agencies are doing is we're going to walk the talk and we're going to kind of do all the hard work to be better rather than just, for lack of a better word, like purpose washing or greenwashing by just like adding some small little feature to try to be part of the cool sustainability club while it's cool. And then like when times are tough, we don't do any of that stuff.
First to go, first to get cut. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that hopefully briefly, but I think that's important to take into account for anyone who's working with any other company, any B2B relationship. And I think that Havas agency B Corp status change is a great example because you are who you keep company with. I have a colleague who says that, and it's just like you have to take into consideration the whole chain, right? And if you're a sustainably focused brand or a purpose-driven brand, I think it's important to think about those partnerships too, because you can work for an agency that is, doing great work for you, but then they're also doing great work for Shell on the other side of things. So I think that's, there's some hypocrisy in some of those relationships too. So anyways, that's another sidebar.
Okay. Yeah. So since obviously you're a leader in this sustainable marketing space, what piece of advice or maybe a favorite resource or something could you offer up others who are trying to shift into more sustainable marketing practices?
That's a great question. I think Ad Net Zero does some great work. Purpose Disruptors, Clean Creatives. I know I just listed 3, but they are nonprofit organizations that are doing some really cool stuff around, activating to change the conversation and change the industry, the marketing industry, and the responsibility that we have as marketers to make decisions on, at all levels of things, down to the media buying, up to the campaign ideation and partnerships, like we were just talking about with agencies.
Yeah, love it. We'll make sure we put some links to each of those in the show notes so that people can check them out.
Great.
With that said, if you don't mind, I'd love to switch into a rapid round conversation real quick, just to get you to know you, have the audience get to know you a little more personally.
Let's do it.
All right. So who do you think is doing sustainability well in fashion at the moment? I put this one in here because I know you're a very fashionable person.
Well, thank you. I am going to give the answer that someone gave me when I interviewed them because I thought it was a great one. So no one that's making anything new, essentially, right? So I think, and this is where I try to, as much as possible, and I'm not a perfect person in this, but I really, really, really try to buy secondhand as much as I can. And I think there are some really cool companies like Poshmark. I buy a lot on Poshmark, and it's all like peer-to-peer resale. Love Value Village, of course. Various consignment, online, offline. So I'm going to say that because, the world doesn't need any more new stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I feel like there's a lot more options for women. Like whenever I go to thrift stores, there's like one rack for all the men's clothing and then like 18 racks for all the women's clothing. Or I've heard of these like outfit rental type companies where you can just like rent some dresses or whatever, wear them a couple times and send it back. I haven't heard any of those for men. So I do love that there are those kind of options, and maybe that's a business opportunity for someone out there in the fashion industry. I know men tend to wear their clothes to death until they're like rags and shredded up, but hey, maybe we can change. We can change. And no one that's making anything new is a fun way to put it too. I remember at the 1% for the Planet conference a couple of years ago, Patagonia was up there saying that they did an audit of kind of consumption of clothing and footprint on the globe, right? And they said technically after their study, the the best case scenario is that people would only buy like, I think it was like 1 or 2 new pieces of clothing a year. Is it like cap it at that, just buy the necessities, but not anything else. And they were like all supporting it. And they're like, yeah, that's great. Like only buy 1 piece of our clothing a year. The rest of the time, come and fix the things you've already bought. You know, they fix or recycle it. So I think they're great. Interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Circular solutions oriented. Yeah.
Right. And I know we're both CPG geeks too. So I figured why not ask, what's your favorite new CPG find lately?
Oh, so I'm waiting. She knows there. I've been connected to some of their team members and they know that I need to have this in Canada stat. It's called My Bacon and it is bacon made of mushroom mycelium. So mushroom roots. Yeah. And it is off the chain good. I cannot tell you it. I've had the opportunity to try it a few times at events in the States. And every time I see them, I'm like, please come to Vancouver. Just get yourself over here in Whole Foods. So My Bacon, if you live in, I don't know where they are. They're definitely in the New York East Coast area, probably in California, but it's delicious.
Yeah. Nice. I'll have to check it out. Cool. Okay. So I asked you for your advice, but what's the best piece of advice you've received either ever or recently?
General advice, and this is just more general, and it comes from a lot of different areas of my life, and I think about it a lot, is along the lines of, we're stronger together than we are apart. And I don't know if anyone has given me that one person I can attribute that direct advice to, but I've just seen it to be true in my career. And whenever I need kind of pick-me-ups, I have a group of people that I go to or individuals, and that's usually kind of what I take away from it. Like I'm not alone in any of this when it feels overwhelming as a business owner or a person who, cares that the world is burning or any of those things. I think it's right. The collective, any message that comes along those lines.
Love it. Yeah, that's a big part of why I'm always doing a lot of community building or just involved in communities like B Corp or 1% for the Planet or AIGA or something like that. Is that feeling that we're not alone in this? There's lots of people who are going through the similar stuff, if not the exact same things you are. And by sharing resources, knowledge, and supporting each other where possible, we are stronger together, right? So I love it. Cool. So who's an impact-driven leader you admire and why? I
definitely follow and enjoy the, speaking and the writings of Solitaire Townsend. I think that's how you pronounce it. She is the founder and CEO of an agency in the UK called Futera. And I just think, I love how she talks about the service industries. So that includes us, that's marketers, that's PR people, that's consultants, that's lawyers, that's anyone who is in the information industry. She talks about us as Agency X and how we have, as Agency X, a huge impact on all matters of sustainability and that we have influence and we have responsibility. And she's just, I find her really inspiring. So if you don't follow her on LinkedIn, go follow her.
Yeah, I'm going to have to do that right away because that's literally what I talk about all the time, like why I started Modern Species, because I realized we creatives, we influence culture and influence decisions at businesses. So with that power comes a responsibility to make better choices and make better suggestions and try to create systems, structures, and products, companies that are better for all species.
Yeah, love it.
I'll check them out. All right, cool. So final question, and this is, selfish since my podcast is called Brands for a Better World. What does a better world mean to you?
Oh, what does a better world mean to me? Well, I think, one where we really are, I don't want to say pre-competitive because I believe in business and I believe in the power of business to generate creativity and innovation and all that stuff, but definitely that like rising tide lifts all boats type thing that we were talking about just a minute ago, like people working more together and understanding and realizing that we can go farther together and faster in some cases. And there are massive problems that we're faced with that are too big for me to even, get my head around really some days, which is why I decided to get my head around the problems right in front of me at my desk and my computer and my little world here. But I think it really is along those lines of like more collaboration and community and communication and the power in that.
Yeah, I love that because the more we work together with others, the more we can just focus on our superpower, like what we're uniquely suited to bring to the world, and really bring our full selves to that work rather than just bringing our partial selves, because we're trying to do it all, right? Like there's somebody out there doing every piece of your life / work that you can partner with, who are going to geek out on that thing much more than you. Like, for example, working with you on digital marketing stuff, I know I'm in safe hands and I don't have to do all the geek out stuff because you geek out on that, right? So just finding the partners that really click and that really go deep in what they do. And then that way you can go deep in what you do. And by working together, you're improving the whole system.
100%. And that trust is so key, right? Knowing that, you're behind you're in your corner figuring out what message to put on the box based on all those research studies that you read. And I can say, okay, great. Well, give those to us and we'll figure out, how to reach the person. So no, I think that's great. Cool. It's a great example.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on and sharing, your wisdom and knowledge around this decarbonizing media, newer to me and maybe newer to a lot of people. So I think you pioneering that or kind of leading the way and helping figure out what that means for others is powerful. And I appreciate that. And then also just thanks for showing up as a more purpose-driven human. Even if you're born into it, legacy, it still means something to continue to show up and see how we continue to evolve that as we move into the future. So thanks for doing all the things you do and for sharing your story with our community too.
Thanks, Gage. Likewise.
Cheers. Thanks for listening. To learn more about Avril or BOA, visit weareboa.com. That's BOA.com. If you like this show, remember to help us grow by liking, reviewing, and sharing. If you're new here, don't forget we have over 100 episodes in the archive. Some might be called Evolve CPG, but it's the same show, so dig in for more goodness. If you consider yourself an impact-driven professional, join me over at impactdriven.community, where we're supporting each other's growth as impact leaders.